Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 171, Flourishing Personified, and this week I'm delighted to say that my guest is Casey Lightbody. Now, Casey is a business growth strategist and marketing mentor for quietly powerful, impact-driven women. I think there are a few of you listening out there. Casey is a seasoned entrepreneur who has scaled multi-six-figure companies over the last 10 years, so she knows what she's talking about. And she also knows firsthand what it takes to create sustainable yet exponential success. After making the hard decision to close her first business, she went on to build her second in a way that feels abundant, aligned, and authentic, and is now dedicated to helping women embody their quiet power and scale their business 100% on their terms. Casey, I am so looking forward to this conversation. So welcome.
Thanks, Joanna. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here and I'm so excited to share with your amazing listeners. And so I am originally from Zimbabwe. I still, having been out the country over 25 years, haven't lost the accent, but really have had a childhood dream of starting my own business, but followed the status quo, got the corporate career, worked my way up the ladder. And when we immigrated to Australia, finally decided that it was now or never. I was going to take the plunge into entrepreneurship. And so I started my first business, which was a consulting business. My expertise, my background is in marketing. I'd studied it at uni and that's what my corporate career was in. And so I started a marketing consulting business, which grew into an agency pretty quickly, Jo, and it was like, oh, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I wanted to create, until it wasn't. And I then had to burn the business down, realized how introverted I was. And that was the catalyst really for me really creating alignment in my life and putting my energy management and my introversion and sensitivity front and center. And so went on to then build my second business, which is now the Quiet Collective, where we support other introverted, quiet, sensitive women to really create success on their terms. So that's just a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you say, you know, when you realized how introverted you were, what sort of age was it when you realized that that was what potentially was making you different then?
Yeah, Jo, so that would have been in my early 40s. So only 10 years, just maybe under 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that. We moved to Australia in 2008. So between 10 and 12 years ago, for the longest time, for 40 years, up until that point, I'd been a pretend extrovert my whole life, and I had no idea until I took the Myers-Briggs test that I actually did self-identify as introverted. And I was like, oh, this is opening a whole new world to me.
We hear that story so often, and it's often people in their 30s. Certainly for me, it was in my 30s, for you 40s, some people even 50s, that all of a sudden the light goes on and it makes sense of kind of their earlier years when they find that out.
Absolutely.
And you took my introvert type quiz and you came out as an open introvert. What resonated with you from that particular definition?
Yes, so I do think that I would never consider myself a wallflower, right, Jo? Like I'm really very comfortable in one-to-one situations. I feel very confident. I can easily hold my own in one-to-one conversations. And even when you put me in a group, if it depends on the type of group, but I am pretty adaptable. However, I need my pre-charge and my recharge time, right? So any kind of social interaction, you'll find me absolutely exhausted and drained at the end of a social interaction. And even, now here in Australia, it's the end of the day and I can feel I can feel my energy. I'm way more upbeat early in the morning, but I've taken some pre-charge time. So I'm ready for this interview, I will say. But so that's the piece about openness. And I think the other thing is what I feel is that I'm also very I said offline that I'm a real open book, right? So again, I think so many introverts feel like they've got to kind of close themselves off and shut themselves off to the world. And I think a lot of my personality is maybe I share a bit too much sometimes, but it's just, it's just who I am. And that's the piece that really resonated with me as well.
Yeah. And I'm smiling because I too am an open introvert. So I always say to people, if you ask me how I'm feeling, you better mean the question, because I'm probably going to tell you rather than just do the whole, oh yeah, I'm fine, thank you, and move on. I probably will tell you, as I did with you when we first started chatting offline today. And for me, that's one of the things that I will share my thoughts and feelings. So I'm possibly not like other introverts, but I think there are still so many myths and misconceptions around what introversion really is.
Exactly true. So true.
So with the quieter women that you work with, what are some of those myths and misconceptions you've come across, would you say?
Yes, Jo, so many. I think one of them is that they can't actually form relationships, that they're lone wolves, and that they have to, well, first of all, that they're not great at building relationships. And so I bust that myth straight out the water and actually say that we actually make amazing connectors. And the reason that we make such amazing connectors is because of our introversion and because of our sensitivity and our ability to actively listen, read between the lines, listen for the nuance, notice the nuances of all the things that make us great connectors, because we can make the other person feel seen, heard, and understood, right? So I think that's one of the myths. And the other myth is that admittedly, we are actually great at this. All women, I think, are very independent and can do things on their own. But I think as introverts, we feel like that we should be lone wolves. We should be okay to actually be on our own and do things on our own. And I know for the longest time, I was like, I've got it all handled. It's all good. I don't need anyone. But actually, it's so, what I know now is that you really do need other people, right? You need people in your corner. You need a tribe. You need that support network to support you in whatever you know, in life and in business. And so I think those are two of the big myths around relationships specifically with people that I like to bust out of the water.
And those are two such important ones when you're working with the quieter entrepreneurial type women who are looking to build their business. So thank you for busting those myths for the likes of me. I really appreciate that. And I often say I'm part of so many different introverted groups, and my heart sinks when I almost see them colluding and perpetuating the myths rather than actually saying, we can do this. And for me, that building that support network of people I trusted, who understood me, who I could turn to, who would call me on my BS sometimes, who would challenge me, but hold me lovingly at the same time, was such an important resource for me to have around me, and will continue to be, I'm sure.
It's so massive, right, Joanna? It's absolutely massive. And this is what I say to all my clients as they're building businesses, because at the end of the day, businesses is all about relationships. Yeah. Like marketing and sales is relationships at the end of the day. If you break it down to its most simplest form, that is all business and marketing and sales really is. And so when we can really embrace this and see the gifts that we have to actually build those relationships, really the opportunity is there for us. And I think, we talk about having that support network, but also it's around the networking. I hear all the time, we're terrible at small talk. Okay, admittedly, I much prefer having deep, meaningful conversations than how's the weather or what did you do today, But again, being able to understand how you network is another myth. Like, it doesn't have to be going to a network event and doing that speed swap, business card swapping nonsense. It's about actually finding ways to actually network in a way that feels good to you. And there's so many ways that you can do that as you're building a business as well. So
yeah, absolutely. And again, for me, with the small talk piece, I'll often talk about the fact that those deeper, meaningful conversations that we so enjoy are often just the other side of that first awkward bit of small talk. So I believe we need to learn how to be armed with some great questions to get us past that, rather than just saying, I don't do it because, I don't network because I'm an introvert. I won't do that because I hate small talk. It's like, recognize that just beyond that is where the gold is. So let's find tools and techniques to actually move us there.
I love that. And this is part of the reason that I actually love it too, is because I think as introverts, we actually are deeply curious about the other person. And so that's what makes small talk so easy for me, because I'm a little bit of a sticky beak, right? I'm like, I want to know about you. So it actually, we can just literally ask questions. And I think that's also, you being a podcast host, what makes us great podcast hosts is we ask great questions because we're naturally curious, So if we can just be armed with a few questions and let the other person actually respond, that's kind of your stepping stone through the small talk into the deeper conversation that we want to have. Well, that's been my experience, at least.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And that's why those questions are so useful, because a lot of people that we're going to be networking with quite like talking about themselves. So if we can get them to open up, we can kind of set back and listen and follow the conversation so that we're asking great follow-up questions, but not having to do all the talking ourselves.
Right.
So, I'm with you completely.
Exactly.
I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier when you were talking about, having to burn down one of your businesses, because as introverts in business, we do face challenges. And clearly that was one of the biggest challenges that you probably faced. So how did you pick back up from that? And I'm breaking all the rules and I'm asking two questions in one case.
Perfect. No problem. Yes.
because what I want to, I suppose, really explore is how it's okay for us to either make mistakes or fail and pick ourselves up and dust ourselves off and get back on the horse, as it were, rather than just licking our wounds and not carrying on again. So if that was a challenge, how did you get yourself up? Because I'm sure there's a lot we can learn from you about that.
Yeah, what a great question, Joanna. And honestly, this has been one of my biggest lessons in business. And so, the decision to burn that business to the ground when I felt so burnt out was one of the biggest decisions that I've ever had to make, because I poured my blood, sweat and tears into building this multi-six-figure business. And I did not want to fail. I didn't want to prove the people who didn't believe in me wrong, right? I wanted to show that I could do this thing. And so it was a really, really hard decision, but I knew in my heart of hearts that it was the right thing to do, because I could not see a way out of the business model. Like it was never going to change, right? It was an agency style and it was just never going to change. And so that was really the start of my personal development journey. And as I mentioned, it was my first realization into how introverted I was. I also learnt about myself how sensitive I was. And that was another thing that I thought was this weakness, because I was told throughout my life, Casey, stop crying. You're so sensitive. Get over yourself. It's not that bad. And, and so I realized how sensitive I was. And I also started to see how many limiting beliefs were getting in my way, right? And all the BS that I was telling myself. And so, I kind of went on this journey and I realized how, okay, I'm still committed to building a business. Like it's something that I really, really, really want. I knew that I wanted to make a difference in the world in a way that I felt like I could never do in corporate. Yeah. And I think this was a big motivator for me, was the fact that it was so much more about the impact rather than the income. Of course, the income was a great carrot as well. Yeah. But it was definitely the impact. And so when I started to look at that, Joanna, I realized, okay, well, hold on, what is it that I want to create? And in that work, as I was reflecting back, I realized that my audience had been professional service-based businesses. And I started to recognize that the women that were struggling, just like me, were the women that I wanted to serve. And so when I picked myself back up, it was like I tapped into this vision, right? And I still have this vision today. The business model has changed, the name of the brand has changed, but the vision hasn't changed, right? And I realized that it was introverted, sensitive, quiet women who had a deep desire to do good in the world. Yeah. I wanted to help them actually create success. And so as I saw that, I saw these circles of women coming together to lift each other up. And I was like, that's what it was. And so when I deeply connect to that purpose, and I can feel it in every cell of my body, that's what pushed me through, right? And so that I got back on the horse because of that, right? It was like, okay, now I can see I have a bigger purpose in the world. I want to leave one of my favorite songs is, and the theme song for the Pipe Collective is Beyonce's I Was Here. And the word is leaving your footprints in the sands of time. And I was like, that's what I want. I want women to heal and lead the world. I believe that we can. And when we leave our footprints in the sands of time, we make such an impact in the world. And so when I can connect to that, you know, in all my being, that makes it so much easier. Yeah. So that's one of the first things. I think the second thing that I've realized in this journey is my propensity for risk. And I think this is very interesting for an introvert because I have a lot of conversations around this in my community. And I don't know whether it's one of my unique superpowers, but I do believe that as entrepreneurs, we have to actually have some degree of risk. And we've got to be willing to actually try things out. And so again, as I've been on this journey of personal growth and personal development and studying all sorts of personality types, including human design, one of the things that I've realized as being a 3-5 manifesting generator and emotional, is that I learn by trying things. I learn by experimenting. And when, you know, my clients love it because like they say, Casey, you've done it already. I've done the membership. I've done the courses. I've done the one-to-many. I've done the book publishing on Amazon. I've sold the t-shirts, all the things, you know. And I'm like, oh, I can bring that breadth of experience to my clients. And so now when I think about failing, I actually don't see it as failing at all. Joanna, I'm like, okay, let's try something on. Let's see whether it works. And then let's check in with myself mentally. And I'm like, okay, is this feeling uncomfortable because it's something brand new and it's like riding a bike and I don't know how to do it yet and so it's feeling uncomfortable? Or is it uncomfortable because it's completely out of alignment? Yeah. And so I give myself space to be in the practice of that. And then if I know it's not working, I'm not afraid to cut it and let it go. And I think that's another thing that's really helped me move forwards, is that I'm okay with taking risks and I'm okay with burning things down to actually move forwards and create spaces for more yeses. And I think that's been a big, big factor in where I am today.
I absolutely love that distinction of testing kind of whether it's just because it's new and unfamiliar. And I did an episode a few ago about kind of being at the learning edge and how uncomfortable that can feel. Yes. But comparing that with actually, am I out of alignment here with my values, with my goals, with my vision, with wherever I want to be? And just that checkpoint is amazing, because you're right. When it's just new, that's when actually you can probably afford to take more risks. Yes. and make those mistakes, but not be attached to the outcome. So it's like, well, okay, let's try a different way of doing it. Whereas if it's out of alignment, it's like, let's not even go there. I love that.
Exactly. Yes. It's massive, right? And Joanna, what I will say is we've got to give ourselves some time, because again, we've got to give ourselves some time to actually figure out, well, when we don't know what we don't know, right, either. So when we're in that space of trying something out, just give yourself some grace and compassion with the timing of it too. And I always say, give it at least 90 days. Like if you're bringing in some kind of new marketing tactic, we don't know if it's going to work or if it's not going to work. We don't know if it's out of alignment or not. So if it's a stretch for you, it's a stretch for you because it's new, and it could be also a stretch for you because it's out of alignment, and that's your responsibility to actually figure out, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And that leads us on nicely to thinking about, how we do business going forward, because let's face it, these last 2 or 3 years have been bizarre. And I've stopped saying when we get to a post-pandemic world or post-COVID world, because I'm not sure we ever will be completely post-COVID. So I think what we need to do is almost kind of regroup and think about actually, how do we move businesses forward in a way that maybe honors the fact that so many people have reassessed their lives during that period. So what would you say is important moving forward in business?
Yeah, Joanna, this is a big question, right? And I've certainly seen a massive shift over the last couple of years, like as we've navigated the pandemic and what that looks like. And I think because there's so many more people online, because we've actually, there's a lot more noise, and I've been in the online space for over 10 years, right? It's been a long time. And I've seen trends come and go, and I've seen social media platforms come and go, and all the things, right? And it's been so interesting. But I think for me, this is an opportunity for us to really bend the rules and do things very differently. And I think there's three things that I think we've really got to take into consideration. The first thing is our personality, right? Really looking at that and dialing up the volume on our personality. That's why I'm continuing to do this work around getting to know myself more and more intimately, because these all make up my unique superpowers, right? And so how can I actually use that? Because that when you can showcase that online, it becomes magnetic, right? And that was so interesting because I've just had a milestone birthday, and I'll share a little aside around this, is that I literally just had a milestone birthday, and I've been on a very spiritual growth path for the last couple of years. I've lost a ton of weight, and I literally just posted my birthday party photos online. We had an amazing party for it, and just as a result of that, I had 2 people inquire about working with me. Like, it wasn't even a post about anything to do with business. It was my personal life, and people reached out and they said, "Casey, you've been such an inspiration. We've really watched your journey." And I think that's part of it, is I've been showcasing my personality and who I really am from the inside out. And that, for introverts, sometimes can be really scary, right? Joanna, I remember being online for the first time, signing up, not even that long ago, a few years ago, but not even that long ago, and I was on a group call on Zoom, and I realized it was video. And you've never seen anyone press the leave button so quickly when I realized I was on video. And so, if anyone's listening and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Casey, I couldn't think of anything worse than posting personal photos on social media," I want to just share that this has been a real journey for me, right? Like, it is about stretching that courage muscle and getting more and more comfortable with it. And who I am today is a shadow of who I was. It's just so different, right? So that's, I'm digressing. The first thing is personality. The second thing is all about perspective. So bringing your unique perspective, being okay with rattling the cages and actually speaking up controversially and bringing your opinion and sharing that. And I think in today's world where, we're also afraid of being cancelled, that we don't say anything. It's quite scary, but people want to hear a different perspective. They want to actually hear how you think differently. So a lot of my content isn't how to do things, tips, things like that, but it's actually how to think differently. How can I actually change your perspective on something and give you something different or unique to think about? And I think being okay with that, and again, those people who are using generic content are going to fall by the wayside. Those of you who are relying on ChatGPT and popping in things into AI and not bringing the humanness and humanity to your copy, it's great for stuff that you want to churn out quickly, but if you're really wanting to form that connection, which is what we were talking about at the top of the podcast, you're going to have to be brave enough to bring your perspective, right? And then the last P is process, right? So how I teach this, Joanna, is I talk about it's really important to be in your feminine flow and making sure that you're in alignment, both strategically, energetically, and mindset-wise, but then having that masculine container to be in your feminine flow. And so this is where you can bring things like automation into your business and making sure that actually things actually give you space and capacity. How can you use the tools that are available around processes and procedures to actually give you the space and the capacity for you to be in your feminine flow? And I think that's really key as you scale your businesses into 2023 and beyond. So, yeah.
I love that. And just as a summary, those 3 Ps of personality, perspective, and process, are 3 things that we can absolutely kind of hang our hats on and understand. So, it's going to obviously get much deeper than that, but just those 3 headline pieces is brilliant. I'm a manifesting generator, by the way, but I'm a 1-3 manifesting generator. So,
oh wow, okay,
yeah.
So your 3 unconscious is my conscious, right? So that's so interesting.
It is, and like you, I refer to myself as a lifelong learner. And I am perpetually curious. So finding out more about what makes me tick beyond this kind of, and some people don't like the label of, introvert, but, that's how I self-identify. I don't have a problem with that, but I am so much more than that. So that's why I continue to do that work too. So in terms of the human connection, again, you mentioned this much earlier on, that as introverts, actually, we are super good at this if we allow ourselves to be. So for those of us who are still maybe struggling to do those early steps of connecting, do you have any tips for us in terms of how to get out of our own way and start believing that we have the ability to connect with others in this way?
Yeah. So the first thing is the inner work, right, Joanna? It's got to start with the inner work too. So really starting to look at yourself and look at, I talk about this, you can't see it's an audio, but I have a gold box behind me, and it's kind of my treasure, I call it my treasure chest. And for the longest time, I had this belief that I wasn't good enough, right? Like I wasn't expert enough. I had all the qualifications, I had all the expertise and experience, but I didn't believe it. And one of my mentors actually made me write a list of all the things, like all my achievements, everything that I'd done, and I popped it into this gold box. And, then over the years, I would gather the testimonials, I'd gather the feedback forms, I'd gather any kind of evidence that I had that I was an expert, and I'd pop them all into the gold box. And every time I was feeling less than, I'd pop the gold box open and I'd have a read, and it would remind me of that, right? And so if you are listening, you're just literally starting out, the first thing is we've got to get sold on yourself first, right? So really look at all the things that you feel are stopping you from moving forwards. Actually challenge yourself and ask yourself, is this really true? And look for evidence to the contrary, right? That's the first step. And then it's literally about finding places that you would like to go to connect. Right? So it's finding your people. So again, with the consulting business, I remember walking in because I thought that the only way to get business was to go to networking events, right? And so I would force myself to go to networking events. And I remember walking into this room, and it was in a big hall, and there were literally rows of chairs facing each other, and we literally had 30 seconds to give our elevator pitch and swap a business card and then move. And I was like, it was the worst experience of my life. And I, even to this day, I don't think I've ever gone back to a networking event in my life. I was scarred for life as a result of that. And I was like, so it's about finding where you would like to connect. So find your communities. And one of my dearest clients, she literally started her business not even 6 months ago. And she found her tribe. She found an online networking event, and she found an offline networking event. And she said, Casey, these are my people. I absolutely love them. And she literally started organizing one-to-one coffee chats. No social media, nothing. She's just signed her first 6 six-figure deal in 6 months as a result, right? And this is like, she's only been in business 6 months.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And she's like, I don't need to be on social media because I found my people. Like, and now she's being invited left, right, and center, and she's, things are happening. She's like, I've got to turn this all off because it's all happening too fast for me. I don't have capacity anymore. I was like, that's a good problem to have. Now we've got to put the procedures and processes in place for you to manage all of this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
But it's really about finding your people and then literally getting out of your own way and doing it, taking action. Those 1% add up, right? And they might not feel like they're adding up just yet. I said that to my client, and she's like, Casey, I feel like I'm just having all these coffee chats. And then one day, it was like, it switched. And she literally she signed probably 4 clients in the space of a week. It just literally switched for her. It was crazy.
That's brilliant. Casey, I could carry on chatting to you for a very long time. I feel that, I have a lot I can learn from you, but we also have a lot in common, which is also so useful. But we probably need to start drawing this to a close. And it's going to be hard, I think, to ask you to say what one piece of advice would you give introverts so that they can flourish? Because my business, Flourishing Introverts, is about really helping people to be the best they can be authentically. We've both had that experience of pretending to be extroverted for too long. So what would be your one piece of advice so that introverts can truly flourish?
Yes. So I think, and this, we actually probably haven't touched on it as much as I would like in this interview, but for me, Joanna, one of the biggest things is making your energy management your number one priority. So every single decision that you make, put it through the lens of your energy management, right? And I think for women specifically that are listening to this, men too, but, particularly women who are wearing all the hats, and we're trying to do life and home and kids and businesses and corporate careers and all the things. We have a never-ending to-do list, and it's actually so hard to actually create the space to actually prioritize our energy management. And we feel guilty for putting ourselves first so often because we've got this multitude of things and people that are relying on us. But honestly, if you can really prioritize that and say, whatever's happening, I understand that I need this, what I call white space, right? It's pre-charge and recharge time.
Yeah.
Then you show up as such a so much better version of yourself, and you can give so much more. And so, because we are so reliant on making sure that our energy management is a priority, that would be the biggest piece of advice for those listening.
And I think that's an absolute gem. And I imagine you've got lots of kind of tools and techniques and tips around that. So I'm sure many listeners are going to want to say, Jo, how can I get in touch with Casey? How can I find out more about what she does? So, Casey, where are the listeners going to be able to connect with you or find out more about your work?
Yes, I'd love for anyone listening to come and join us on our cozy corner on the interwebs. It's my private Facebook group. It's open to anyone. It's called the Introverted Impact-Driven Entrepreneurs, and I can share the links with you. But it's my Facebook group, and if you just search on Facebook, you'll be able to find it too. Perfect. I'd love to see anyone in there.
We'll make sure that the link is in the show notes so that people can absolutely come find you there. And we all need those cozy corners, not to hide in, but to actually be inspired into action so that we can really flourish. Casey, thank you. This has been an absolute joy. And I'm almost tempted to say, let's book in another one, because I think we could also explore so much more. But for today, Casey, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast. Thanks so much.
If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.